Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to day 3 of our GYAN course on Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning Algorithms, a comprehensive study. We have another exciting lineup of lectures ahead. At 10:30 a.m., Professor Anu Gokhale will begin with a discussion on case studies and how to critically analyze AI system outcomes, both predictions and automated decisions. Following that, at 11:30 a.m., she will deliver the next lecture on measures for assessing algorithmic applications, including a look at design flaws and strategies to counter them. After the lunch break from 12:30 to 1:30 p.m., we reconvene with Professor Gautam Makwana, who will speak on research paradigm and frameworks in AI, ML, data analytics, and allied technologies. Finally, at 2:30 p.m., Professor Gautam Makwana will conclude the day with an insightful lecture on generative AI and quantum computing. We look forward to another day of rich learning and thought-provoking discussions. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for returning the greeting. That's so sweet of you. Today is our third day of the course in machine AI and machine learning. So, like was mentioned before, I have two lectures at 10:30 and 11:30. Let's see what they are, and then we'll have a break after that. So, lecture 9 is going to focus on discussion on case studies, how to critically analyze AI system outcomes, both predictions and automated decisions. Basically, there are two broad categories to assess AI system outcomes: scientific performance metrics and societal impact metrics. So, what I'm going to do is lecture 9 will focus on AI system performance metrics exclusively from a scientific viewpoint. And then in lecture 10, which is right following this one, we will look at the AI system impact exclusively from a societal viewpoint. So we'll kind of separate the scientific viewpoint and the societal viewpoint. So we are not mixing the two, okay? Sources of AI and ML's algorithm design flaws like fairness, transparency, explainability, accountability, and examples, those all will be discussed in lecture 10. So we will only focus on the scientific part first, okay? And then we'll also look at strategies to counter the flaws. Okay. So this is the outline for lecture 9, which is the system performance metrics from a scientific viewpoint. But like always, before we begin our day, we begin with a 1-minute silent meditation. Okay. Today, I have a quote from Rinpoche. Rinpoche is like a title given to Buddhist monks. You may already know about it. It's like Santa or Guru in what the Hindu culture would have. So Rinpoche is the same one, and the Sakyam Mimphab is his name. And so the body benefits from movement and the mind benefits from stillness. The body benefits from movement. So you had some when you were up and down, So now let's still our mind, okay? Okay, let us prepare for a 1-minute silence. Oh, that's the only time I use my phone. Okay, that's not mine. Okay, so let's begin, folks. Okay. 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 So we are all ready now. Okay, let's talk with about the performance metrics. Okay, here are all the different performance criteria that we are going to talk about, beginning with confusion metrics, which really assembles a lot of these variables: accuracy, precision, recall, the F1 score, the area under the curve, receiver operating characteristic, AUC, ROC, and then the log loss. Okay, so let's begin with the confusion metrics and a table that summarizes the performance of a classification model. So basically, we are looking at, as you can see, the predicted value and the actual value, and then the true positive, true negative, and false positive. Okay, so those are the four different quadrants for the confusion metrics that where it provides those counts. True positive is correctly predicted positive cases. True negative, of course, correctly predicted negative cases. False positive is incorrectly predicted positive cases. So, false is basically incorrect prediction, true is correct prediction. That's the difference. And then positive or negative, incorrectly predicted negative cases. And as you can see, I also put the type 1 and type 2 error. So if you're statistics people and if you're, we know that we said the alpha, which is the type 1 error, and then we also said the type 2 error in good research studies. Not everybody does. But false positive is the type 1 error and false negative would be the type 2 error. So these counts are necessary to calculate performance metrics like accuracy, precision, recall, and F1 score, because the formulas for those come directly from these, okay, from these counts. So what is accuracy? Accuracy in performance is primary to or essential for any AI system, okay? Like basically we always look for accuracy. Accuracy is extremely important. Spam emails showing up in the inbox. Now that's not accurate, right? Okay, and vice versa also, but then that falls under a different category. Significant implications of inaccurate AI systems. Credit scoring algorithms rely on accuracy to maintain regulatory compliance because a lot of banks everywhere are regulated. All the financial institutions are regulated by the government, right? So those regulations, to comply with the regulations, then the accuracy is very critical. Accuracy of the outcomes. Sources of inaccuracy. AI models are often trained in controlled environments, right? I mean, we look at real life data, but it's not live, real life data, right? It's archived data. Okay, so trained in controlled environments with curated data sets. Curated, why? Because we try to remove errors, we try to remove all the missing records, so on and so forth. So that's curation. But once deployed, they face real world data that can vary significantly. Okay, so the real world data and live data looks very different from what that archived data is, which is the curated data set. So the inaccuracy stems some from there. Also, real world data changes over time, a phenomenon known as data drift. Just like we have different characteristics for different generations, right? We talked about Gen Z, then we talked about the Gen Y, so on and so forth. Then all real world data changes over time. Data drift. Example, language usage. The language that youth may be using today would be different from the language that was used 10 years ago, correct? The way the protocol, even the way we think, it has definitely evolved over years, correct? Okay. And the consumer preferences, the market trends, all of it change over time. So basically, a society that is called. So the data that was relevant 20 years ago is not necessarily relevant today for today's circumstances. So typically when we trail, we want huge data and then we look at archive data. We look at archive data for the last 20 years, 30 years. But there have been so many changes that have happened that that data becomes less appropriate or relevant for today's times. You understand what happens? And that's where the inaccuracy in the algorithm stems from, because that data that it's trained on is that curated data, which doesn't really, is not 100% representative of today's circumstances. So use of synthetic data can help fill gaps in training data sets. What do we do then? Create data, right? The synthetic data. So we create data, but that fails to capture the complexity and the unpredictability of real. So when we create data, we kind of say, oh, create some for this, some for that. So it's very organized creation, correct? We don't do disorganized creation, because that's the whole idea is of creating data, is to make sure it's representative. So it's very organized. But then in real life, nothing is organized, right? So then that unpredictability is lost. There is a little story I can tell you about. This was when the first time like the voice recognition software was being developed. Okay, and this was at a California hospital where it was being launched, and there were different universities that were collaborating to develop it. It was developed, it was tested, very tested, and then they deployed it in the hospital, and then it failed miserably. It was for a voice recognition system for a hospital. Okay, and they were like, gee, what happened? And what had happened was all the developers were male, and all the users, when they deployed it in the hospital, the nursing staff, they were females. So what happened is, if you can tell if a voice pitch is different for a male versus a female, right? And so that voice recognition system straight particular voice pitch, which was all for male, and then when it was deployed, it failed. Totally different population. So nobody ever even thought, hey, let's look at actually who's going to use the system. So every time we have to look at who's going to, not just from your viewpoint, because you are the one designing the system, but hey, who's going to use my system? Who are going to be the users? If the users are going to be you develop something that is really fancy, but something with rural applications, okay? At the urban population is great. They find it useful, but it's for the rural one. Yeah, those people are clueless as to what to be done with that. They may not be cognizant about it. So how to measure and improve AI accuracy? First, let's see how to measure, which is how to calculate the ratio of correct predictions or classifications to the total predictions or classifications, typically expressed as a percentage. So balance overfitting and underfitting is critical to AI accuracy. So overfitting is a model becomes too specialized in the training data, capturing noise or outlier other than the general patterns, leading to high performance during training. Underfitting is when a model is too simplistic. It just captures just meaningful patterns, or may not receive enough relevant information, feature engineering, leading to consistently poor predictions. So techniques to improve accuracy: data cleaning and pre-processing to ensure representative data mimics real-life data. So whenever we clean data or, pre-process it, we have to be careful that we are not changing the data set to mimic something that really is not representative of real-life data. So maybe even if some of the records weren't full, we may want to fill in the gaps to keep some of the records that are representative. So we have to be, that's where the touch comes into play. Remember, I always said, don't leave your door. Just make sure you're involved. So optimization, choosing algorithms tailored to the specific tasks. For example, decision trees work well for structured data, while neural networks are suitable for NLP. Okay, so just know which algorithms are appropriate for what. That's all. That can also improve the accuracy of the model. up using appropriate algorithm. Becomes available and regular retraining helps combat. What happens is if you train a model and now you're using it and you haven't retrained it in 5 years, it has become the data drift has actually already happened. Okay. Training as data becomes available is very critical. It is a drain on resources. Let me tell you that it's not something, every oh now we have launched it, but then in the background at the back end the model should always be kept updated with the new data that's coming in. Thinks performance monitoring ensures that any drops in accuracy are detected and addressed immediately. So real-time monitoring, both of these, I would say continuous learning and real-time monitoring even applies to us humans, right? Same thing would happen to algorithms of AI because AI is, after all, human intelligence represented. Okay, so think of it as what would I have to do to keep myself updated is what the AI system would have to do. About underfitting and overfitting and the validations set, and we had a sweet point, and this is the number of iterations and the error. So, typically do not over focus, nor do you just want to look at the broad thing. So let's move now from what is ice cartoon that differentiates between precision and accuracy. I think you'll enjoy it. On that one leg of the target. Okay, so that's really high precision, very, very low accuracy. Okay, so there is a difference between precision and accuracy. This is showing you the difference in like a nice pictorial format. No precision, no accuracy, where it's just all over the. Okay, so that gives you an idea for what is precision. They are both not the same thing. Okay, you can have high accuracy and very low precision and vice versa. So AI system when minimizing false positives is crucial, and the cost of false positives can be high. There are some examples for this. For example, medical minimize the risk of a false alarm. If you tell people, oh, I think you have this, whatever, severe disease, cancer, whatever, and then it's like a false alarm. Can you imagine how it's a false positive and you are creating a scary situation? Sometimes do you know that people can get harmed only because they think they have something when actually they don't, and then that mindset itself causes harm for the body. So false alarms are really, really bad for any human being. So my medical diagnosis, you would rather err on the other side, having less false negatives are okay, but false positives are not okay, is what I'm trying to say. Why? Because we don't want to scare people into thinking they have something when they actually don't. Okay, so that would be a bad situation. Another one would be spam detection. You want to avoid marking important emails and spam. I mean, how many times do we visit our spam folder? I typically don't visit it for a whole week. Rarely will I visit it every day, almost never. And once a week, I'll go and look at, what did my spam folder have? If some, but if it's an important email that needs to be responded immediately or within 2 or 3 days, and it's went accidentally into the spam folder, think of, it could have detrimental effects, right? So those are the times when false positives are bad and we want to minimize those. Finance flagging a legitimate transaction as fraudulent can upset a client. Hey, I have a valid credit card. Why are you rejecting it, right? Okay, I mean, it's a matter of, even like self-respect. Like, hey, I know I have a valid credit card. Why isn't it going through? Correct? Okay, so those financial transactions, false positives, minimizing those are very important. So how to calculate precision? It's the ratio of true positive predictions out of all instances predicted as positive. So basically true positives and then the sum of true positives and false positives. Okay, that's precision. So high precision can be misleading. Why? Because focuses solely on correctly predicted positive cases and neglects the false negatives. Again, over defining any system is not healthy. Okay, so solely on correctly predicted positive cases, neglecting false negatives, and that is where recall comes in which we discuss next. Okay, so precision and recall kind of balance the two, balance each other out, and we will be talking about it. So techniques to improve precision: data cleaning to handle missing values, errors, inconsistencies, and irrelevant information. Again, we go back to our data set, right? Just making sure that that data set is valid and strong. Feature engineering, create new informative features to improve model performance. And continuous learning and real monitoring. That becomes extremely important for any of these scientific measures, which is continuous learning, which is continuously updating the retraining of the data set, keeping it up to date, the algorithm with new data as it comes in to avoid the data drift. And of course, the real-time monitoring, which makes sure that all the false positives and all false negatives are being taken care of. So let's talk about recall. AI system recall. Recall is called or known as sensitivity or true positive rate. Recall in performance is essential when missing a positive instance is costly, so important to minimize false negatives. So missing a positive instant can be expensive. So here are some examples of that. Medical diagnosis, again, from the other viewpoint, do not want to miss detecting a disease. In precision, we want to minimize the risk of false alarm. In recall, we want to make sure that we don't miss the actual. If somebody has something, then we are addressing it right away. Something is in stage 0, stage 1. We want to address it then rather than say, let's see if it could be a false positive. You know what I mean? So in the recall, we would rather be wrong on the positive side than right. And then in the precision, it's just the opposite. So precision and recall are kind of opposites of each other. In other words, precision and recall are both critical measures. Precision improves at false positive decrease, while the recall improves in false positive as false positive decrease. So as and when is the real distinction there. So measures the ratio of true positives identified out of all positive cases, and techniques to improve recall. Adjusting class weights, especially important for imbalanced data sets, picking model more sensitive to minority class, which is a smaller sample. That's the whole point about the positive, because many times the accuracy, what will happen? Accuracy is dependent on the larger data set. Okay, so if 95% of the people are represented from one category and it works for them, those 5% it never works on or is always inaccurate are ignored all the time. You got it what I'm saying? Because it will have over 95% accuracy. But if the recall would be really bad. Why? Because it's going to miss those 5% all the time. So adjusting class weights, especially important for imbalanced data sets, making model more sensitive to minority class or smaller sample. Assigning different costs to false positives and false negatives can help optimize the model for higher recall by penalizing false negatives more heavily. So it depends on exactly what it is that you're measuring, that the weight should depend on, okay? I'm not going to say this weight always weight this way. There is no standard method to weight something. You always have to weigh in what are the positives of doing. Now, pregnancy, for example, true positive saying you're pregnant, and a true negative you're not, which is right. False positive saying, oh, some male is pregnant, when obviously we know it's not possible even today with today's technology. And then false negative tied to whether you're not pregnant. So it just gives you something that is, very doesn't, pregnancy is like something, not a disease. That's why I picked this, okay, rather than any particular disease, because it doesn't bother anyone that much to be pregnant or not to be pregnant. Okay. So, okay, let's look at the F1 score now. F1 score of AI systems, that's the harmonic mean of precision and recall. So remember that in any AI system, whatever algorithms that you're running, you are going to basically document accuracy, document the precision, document recall, document F1 score. Okay. You will be doing that. I'm telling you from now, right now, because anytime you do an AI study, that is part of your scientific metrics. Okay. Assessing the performance. So ranges from 0 to 1, 1 being the best possible score, provides a balanced view of the model's performance. Essential when dealing with imbalanced data sets, one class has significantly more instances than the other. And valuable tool for evaluating classification models. So why use that score? What is that score? Why use it? Okay. Predicts the majority class can still have high accuracy even if it performs poorly on the minority class. I just gave you an example, right? Let's say there were cats and dogs, and we are trying to determine whether that particular animal is a cat or a dog. But there are 96 dogs and 4 cats. So it doesn't ever predict the cat right, just randomly, maybe once, but every time predicts the dog correctly. It will have 96% accuracy, or at least 95 over 95%. Okay. And so we'll say, oh, this is an accurate model. Hey, but wait, it missed the cat every time. Correct? Okay. So that's where the balancing the majority class and the minority class comes into play. So you might wonder, what is majority, what is minority? Image classification. 96% of the images will be this way, 4%. But maybe those 4% are the ones we want to focus on. And if it misses those every time, then what's the value of that algorithm, right? So we have to be aware of what it is that the algorithm is doing. F1 score provides a more comprehensive evaluation by considering both false positives and false negatives. So what did we miss on the false positive? Oh, we detected it as positive, but it was an incorrect positive. That is a false positive, right? Incorrect positive. False negative is incorrect negative. We couldn't detect that it was there. That is an incorrect negative, correct? So F score can help detect overfitting, where a model performs well on training data but poorly on the unseen data, because training data can have biased or be skewed in one direction, but the unseen data, we can never tell what that unseen data is going to look like. So what is the best score for all three of these, like accuracy, precision, recall? Obviously, those are probabilities, so you can probably guess. So accuracy, of course, is predictions or classifications correct over correct plus incorrect. So I find it easy to do it this way. Precision, true positives and true positive, false positives. Recall, true positive over true positive plus false negative. So that's the difference between the two. So when we talk about precision versus recall, in the formula itself, you can tell what the difference is, between the two. And then the F1 score is 2 times the true positive over true positive plus, you can see the. So this is how we calculate these scientific measures, okay? Let's talk about the area curve. ROC curve is a visual representation of model performance across all thresholds. So calculating the true positive rate, TPR, or false positive rate, FPR, we'll just, abbreviate it that way. at every possible threshold in practice at selected intervals. Okay, at selected intervals, that is an important thing not to be missed, because we can't do it for every record. Okay, this is not done for every record. It's done at every fifth record, every 10th record, whatever that may be. Okay, calculate that ratio of true positive rate over false positive rate, graph the points and draw a curve connecting them. And what is the area under the curve? That is your ROC curve, receiver operating characteristic. Again, operating stick, we have it for almost every device. If you do a transistor, it has a characteristic curve. If you do a diode, every device has a characteristic curve, right? And the area under the characteristic curve is nothing new concept, okay? So that same concept is being applied here, is what I'm trying to say. The area under the ROC curve providing a single scalar value that summarizes the model's overall performance. Okay, so how do we, the AUC values? 0.5 model is no better than random guessing. So don't say, oh, I got a 0.5. Not bad. Not bad. It is what a random guessing. You know, remember that joke about a data set? Oh, this is my data set. This is random data set. Random data set had higher accuracy, right? It can happen because the data set that you picked was so bad. Okay. So AUC of 0.8 or higher indicates good performance. Even that is even true for any correlation. If you have done any correlation study, typically they say you have to have a correlation of over 0.7 at a minimum, like 70% is the threshold, and anything over 80% is good, and over 90% is excellent. Okay, so let's look at the log loss. Logarithmic is, of course, log and loss of AI system. So what is log loss or cost entropy? Okay. So measures the difference between the predicted probabilities of a model and the actual outcome. So something we predict, but what does it happen in actuality? And the difference is usually between what is predicted, and what is happening in real life. Okay, that's typically how it goes. So simple accuracy, which we have reviewed, only considers whether a prediction is correct, while log loss takes into account the predicted probability of each outcome. So the probability, with what confidence level do you make that prediction? Okay, so the confidence level is important. That's your probability of the prediction. So log loss penalizes models for being confident in incorrect predictions. If you are making incorrect predictions, then your log loss model is going to show that, okay? This concept is similar to negative marking or deduction for wrong answer on a test. Sometimes many tests will say, like, oh, we have negative marking. What does that mean? Like all your answers that are correct, you get points for that. But if you answer something and that's the wrong answer, maybe quarter or half a point would be deducted, right? Maybe not a full point. It's never the whole thing, but at least a quarter or a half point is deducted. So then if I'm not sure, I might as well leave it blank, right? That's one strategy. So that's the same thing here. If you're not confident, then don't predict, is what it's trying to tell the model. So the model is being taught just like we are. Hey, don't make just random, hey, I want to answer every question. Okay, B. Then I have no idea whether it's A, B, C, D, E. I'll just say randomly close my eyes and do something. Okay, that's typically, if that were to happen, that model is going to be penalized, just like we would be penalized. Okay. So low log loss values indicate better model performance, with the perfect model having obviously a log loss of 0. So log loss of 0 does mean that there are no incorrect predictions. Okay, so everything that it predicted was right. Now, how many of those, like the predictions, whether they're right or not, the accuracy, recall, all those are there. But log loss is strictly looking at incorrect predictions. Okay, so AI in software development. So we have talked so much about AI, so I thought I'll bring that up. I mentioned this, very in a general terms before. Companies like Meta and Google are actively integrating AI into their software development processes. AI is being used to generate code. Oh, you have a hand up? Sure. Let me finish this sentence and I'll come to you. AI is being used to generate code, currently taking over nearly 30% of the coding work traditionally done by human engineers who now focus on more complex and innovative work. So, if those of us who are doing routine work in coding, then we have to be aware that, hey, what can AI do for my job? I use AI to make my job better? Okay, so that's why I said everybody who is here has no threat of losing their job from AI. Why? Because you know what is AI, you will be using AI. Anybody who uses AI then transcends over AI and does something more. Go ahead. Good morning. Good.
My question is regarding the loss. So we have discussed here about the cross entropy loss, wherein it's nothing but a difference between the actual value and the predicted value of the model. So in the MSc also, where it's nothing but mean squared error, we are just taking the difference between the predicted value and the actual value, and we are square of them, so that the none of the negative value neglify the positive error. So now, when should we use MSc and when should we go with the cross entropy loss? Because ultimately, both are giving the difference between the actual value and the predicted value. And second question is about the imbalanced data set. Valley here mentioned that we need to provide some weight value to the minority class. Now, for what? Predicting the minority samples to the correct class. Right? Suppose we have the imbalanced data set, then definitely there will be the bias for the minority class. So we need to assign certain weight value. That what I understood. So now my question is, if we assign the higher weightage value to the minority class, so will it not be biased for the majority class prediction?
Yeah, there are different strategies for the impact data sets. It's not necessarily having higher weight for the minority class. It might be segmenting the data set into having equal number of majority and minority. That is one way that is done. So we are not, and then doing the running the algorithm for it. So it's not necessarily assigning. So the algorithm is trained differently for that data set. So that way you can run more than one algorithm on the data set when you actually get it in real life. Can this algorithm work? Because it might work great for the majority class, which is actually, definitely we want that. We don't want to ignore the majority. At the same time, while we emphasize the minority, we give precedence. And so that is one way. The second way is you run two algorithms. One for the where the majority and minority is balanced, one where exclusively for the majority, because there's no dearth on how many times you can run the algorithm or different algorithm. So you can find it different ways. Just like there are different ways of looking at the same problem, you can run different algorithms and have the algorithms designed that way. And if you're confused, I can explain it to you again in our break. But basically, the whole idea is balancing the data set and having the algorithm one way, and not saying ignore the majority. Never do that, because you do want, if 96% are one way, you definitely don't want to just prioritize 4% and ignore the 96%. You don't want to ignore the dogs over the cats, like we had that example before. Okay, you definitely, so you can have an algorithm that identifies the dogs correctly. You can have a separate algorithm that identifies all that data.
So now, can't we use the augmentation techniques? Which will help us to make a balanced data?
Absolutely, you can use different augmentation techniques that can actually. It is called layered algorithm. So you have one layer, then you have another layer, you have another layer, multi-layered. And so those are the augmentation techniques that can be used. Absolutely. And those augmentation techniques come from actually doing, what I just explained.
And madam, the application area of the MSc and the gross MBA?
Application area, I wouldn't classify, do this for this one, do this for that one. I would look at the problem really and then decide which one makes sense. So there is, I wouldn't categorize right now. What oh, for this always go this way. As same thing goes for algorithms. Just because marketing segmentation has used one type of algorithm before, I wouldn't say don't try something else. We have to be creative. We have to come up with new methods. So let's not box ourselves into one way or the other. That's why I'm always careful about not boxing ourselves. I want to motivate people to be creative. So I always say, have an open mind, have an open mind. Okay. So AI agents are integrated into its software stack, allowing them to learn from the code base, user behavior, and suggest improvement. So that's what the AI agents are doing. We'll be able to create user interface layers as needed, interacting with databases and other components. And this is all about how AI is used for software development, okay? So faster product releases and more efficient development cycles. So typically user interface layers were usually always created by humans, but even AI is doing it. These human engineers are needed to guide and oversee AI. That is a critical bullet, okay? High-end software developers did not benefit from AI tools. So that's something to understand that, hey, AI is not doing my work. That's what high-end software developers found. So, they are no threat. AI tools are not a threat to high-end software developers. Okay, finally wrap up and takeaways. Some humor about AI cherry picking the data to make a point. So, it's basically it is not uncommon for a whole, whenever we have the outcomes or something, to cherry pick something and say, hey, that's beneficial to me. I'm going to show only that part. As you can see, this is the trend from 2019 to 2023. And if you just you can show an upward trend when technically it went up and came down, right? Okay, so cherry picking data is not an uncommon practice. It is done, but we have to be careful of that. Okay. So improving overall ML model performance, experimenting with different algorithms. That's what I just said a couple of minutes ago. Do not box yourself into thinking, oh, this is done this way, this is done that way. No, you can try something new. Okay. So different ML algorithms have different trade-offs between precision and recall. For example, decision trees have higher recall compared to precision, while support vector machines, SVMs, common, tend to have a higher precision compared to recall. So there's always a trade-off between the two. So try to see which one makes sense for that particular application. Implementing class weights and data balancing techniques. If there are significantly more negative cases than positive, giving more weight to the minority class can help balance precision and recall. We just talked about that, but even giving weight can produce a detrimental effect on the other side. Okay, so I'm not promoting this technique at all. Okay, but it is done. But again, you have to be aware that this is what I've done. Is this helping me make the algorithm better? The whole idea is about making the algorithm better. Using ensembling, a process of combining the predictions of multiple models. Remember, I talked about try to run it one way, try to run it another way. Those would be multiple models to improve overall performance. This is called meta-analysis. Meta-analysis is commonly done in review of literature. If you have done some review of literature, just publishing articles, that is simply a review of existing literature. Meta-analysis is an actual valid statistical technique for taking the research studies, understanding what their data set was, what was their error rate, what was their outcomes, and then categorizing them and doing a meta-analysis of that. So meta-analysis is absolutely a valid technique that can be used even for the AI. using domain knowledge. Now, this is very important. For example, based on human knowledge, using features, certain words or phrases that are specifically related to spam emails may improve the model's performance. That's why I said, don't leave yourself at the door. Just bring your experience and knowledge with you as you're looking at the problem, because you can put in things there that can only improve your model. So hyperparameters, hyper is anytime we talk about hyper systems, it's always sitting over and above something, correct? So ML model settings for hyperparameters, what are they? They are adjustable settings. Fine-tuning these improves performance. Examples include learning rate, controls the step size during the optimization process. So tenth record, what should be that interval rate? A small learning rate results in longer training time. Obviously, the more precise you get, it takes much longer, but also you have to be economics. Anything can be done as perfectly as possible, but then your cost is going to go up, your time is, it's not going to be economical and not going to be useful for real life where everything you want instantly. So small learning rate results in longer training time and slow convergence to optimization, and just the other way around for large learning rate. Batch size, number of training examples used in one iteration of training a model. Small batch size requires more training time but results in stable convergence and better generalization. As opposite to that, the large batch size accelerates training but requires more memory, suboptimal generalization, so on. Finally, number of hidden layers. We always talk about that in neural networks, right? Okay. Critical design choice that significantly impacts performance. Complex patterns require more layers, but may also require more data and computational. With less data, if you have too many hidden layers, like I said, then you are almost going more in depth, like overfitting that data for no reason. So simpler tasks requires fewer layers. Regularization strength prevents overfitting. Increasing it may improve precision, while decreasing it may improve recall. Okay. Okay. That concludes our lecture 9. Remember, lecture 10 is related to how to critically analyze AI system outcomes. Except, what is the difference between lecture 9 and lecture 10? Someone from the audience? Jaya, forgot. What did we say at the beginning? Lecture 9 will focus on this. Lecture 10 will focus on that. Oh, one hand is up. Go ahead.
Lecture was regarding the parameter for the AAC science.
Right. I hear somebody saying societal impact for 10, and 9 was scientific parameters. You both at that whole corner. Very good. Excellent. So that's what we are going to. So today you might say, we talked about AI system outcomes, but we never talked about impact on society. That's what coming in lecture 10. Okay. And right now it was all about scientific metrics. Okay. With that, then I think we are. Oh, thank you. With that, we are going to have a group picture from what I understand Dr. Makwana was saying. And then the second thing we want to do, I gave you some homework yesterday, and I know. Okay, so we are going to resolve like who has what articles and stuff like that. So we will resolve that. So don't go anywhere during the break. That is the break. The break is talking about that. Okay, and then we'll go to lecture 10. So don't leave the room.